it was probably 10 years ago, and the promoter owner uh, actually started a fight in the club, and the club turned into a melee brawl. And let's just say it all turned out bad, and I didn't get my money.
Hey everyone, it's David Stark from Watcher Pass. Today I'm talking to Mike Young, the writer and director of Stealing Jokes, which was released on November 1st, 2024. I'm going to talk to him right now. And while you're watching, if you can like and subscribe to this channel, that would be fantastic. I'll start a lot. Thank you. Thanks so much for joining me today. I've got Mike Young, the writer and director, talking about Stealing Jokes, which is coming to digital and on demand on November 1st, 2024. It is a kind of hybrid comedy heist thriller that has a really fantastic cast, a lot of jokes you'd imagine a film called Stealing Jokes has, and a plot that has lots of twists and turns along the way. I am excited to talk to you, so thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man.
Of course, of course. So, first question. How did you come up with this? What promoter screwed you over that made you want to just like get revenge in a movie form?
I was opening for Chappelle years ago, a few years back, and I was kind of looking out at the room, and he was probably getting 100,000 minimum for the night, and they thought it'd be cool to just pay me 500 bucks to open. And I kind of had this thought like, there's got to be a safe in this building. And then I started reading about comedians like Tim Allen and all the comedians back in the day that would get screwed over for their money while they were on the road. And club promoters would be like, "Hey, man, listen, I got beat on liquor sales. I can't pay you the 10,000, but can you take three and some vintage coins?" And then I did a show in Chicago where the guy's like, "Listen, bro, can I get you tickets to a White Sox game, and I'll give you a pit bull." And I'm like, "Listen, bro, I need my money." And so this idea it was just kept being in my head, like comedians are doing God's work. They're out there spreading joy, and people think it's okay to not pay them at times. And I just was like, I got to write a movie about this. And so I wrote a movie about, comedians that go on tour and they get stiffed and they pull off a heist. And obviously mayhem ensues because the guy that they robbed is Michael Rapaport's club. He plays a gangster owner and they got to get him his money back. And so it becomes a bunch of twists and turns. But the impetus was basically like so many comedians I know have been stiffed, and there's little testimonials throughout the movie with real comedians. Like Paul Verzi literally did a show somewhere, and he's like, the guy's like, "Hey man, I can't afford this right now, but can I pay you in cocaine and coins?" And he's like, "No, you can't." And so it's happened throughout the years. For some reason, comedians always got looked at as like the jesters and like we don't deserve what we do deserve. And so I was like, you know what, I need this sentiment. And it goes for any artist, any musician, anybody that's ever been on the road, put their life in jeopardy for their art and not gotten treated properly. So basically, I had to do this so I didn't actually rob a club.
I was gonna say this sounds very much like therapy for you, right? Like you just kind of
Total
had to
therapy,
put
bro.
this out
For
there.
ye- for years, you're on the road. You know what I mean? You're out there on the road. You're risking your life. There's really no great security for comedians. You know what I mean? There's just nothing. And so I was like, this isn't right. This is like built. This business is built like upside down. Like you need to take care of your comics. And so it's a tribute to comedy and comedians.
Yeah, and it's also like it's kind of a endemic in the arts in general, where people are like, "Oh, like I'll give you exposure for this," and you're like, "That doesn't feed me, like that doesn't pay for my rent." Like, I love doing this, but I also need to live. So, I mean, this is I love the stories here because it's so ridiculous that you're like, how could that ever actually happen?
Right. And then you dig deeper and you do a little reading and research and you find out, oh, comedians have actually gone to get their money in unscrupulous ways. There have been stories of like, there's a story of like DL Hughley having to, take a gun out for a guy. And obviously Richard Pryor had that famous story of going, when they didn't want to pay him in Vegas and he went in with like a fake gun, and to try to get his money, but it was the mob that he was going in for. And they were like, "Yeah, look at this kid. That's pretty cute. Yeah, that's a cute squirt gun."
Yeah.
So there's been stories throughout the years, but it's really a tribute to comedians and artists who deserve, what they deserve to get their money.
Yeah, exactly. And you said unscrupulous. Some might say, karmically balanced ways, right? Like it just depends, right? Like
We're just out there, man. We're doing
yeah,
God's work. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
We're just equaling out yeah, we're just paying karma up front.
Yeah, exactly. So I love the cast. The cast is very funny. I was curious, like, how did you get them? Had you toured with them before? Had you worked with these people before? Or did you just kind of like throw out a casting call of like, hey, are you a comedian? Have you been screwed? Do you want to make a movie about being screwed as a comedian? Like, how did that work?
No, actually, ironically enough, I didn't really know anybody that well except for Rapaport, who had done my previous two movies. I really didn't know Jeff Dye that well. I didn't know Dustin, and I didn't know Haha Davis. I had a casting director. I cast Jeff Dye just off an audition. He auditioned. I thought he did a great job. He did a great job in the movie. I hired him that way. And then, excuse me, Haha Davis is a Detroiter. So I'm from Detroit. I kind of watched a bunch of his clips. You know, the kid's got like 8 million followers. I'm like, what's going on with this guy? He's from Detroit. I had never heard of him. I started watching all his sort of Instagram, sketches and comedy bits. I was like, this kid's legit funny, but he had never played a lead in a movie. I think he only appeared in like one movie, like with one sentence. I took a few meetings with him. I'm like, dude, you are legit funny. And I just basically wrote towards I changed that character to fit his voice. So initially it was written in Orlando Jones was actually going to play that part, an older comic who had kind of seen his better days. And so when I met Haha, I went and rewrote the character for like a young dude who already hit it big, but now, is on the downslide. And so he just nailed it and he was super funny. And Luke Null, who was on SNL, I didn't even know he was on SNL. I never heard of him. I'd never seen him before. He auditioned. He auditioned against Matt Rife. He auditioned against all these dudes with names, but he knocked it out of the park so crazy funny that I was like, dude, I have to give you this part. And who are you? And he's like, yeah, I was on SNL for a year and I got fired. I'm like, I'm so glad you got fired, bro, because I wouldn't be able to afford you if they kept you.
Hey, it all works out, right? It all works
It
out.
all worked out.
And I mean, surprising cameo. I don't know if this not really a spoiler, but White Boy Rick. Like, where did that come from? Do you know White Boy Rick? Like, I was just like, I've seen the
Oh,
movie, and I was like, okay, that's a weird like call out right there.
so that was obviously inside baseball for a Detroit film. But White Boy Rick is famous, obviously, in Detroit, and now because they did a movie about his life, and Matthew McConaughey played his dad. To be honest, I mean, I'll just be honest with you. When Rick was in prison his last couple years, I had met him through a couple friends. He started calling me to write his book. He knew I was a writer from Detroit. We started communicating while he was still locked up. He got out 2 years into our communication, and when he got out, I was shooting stealing jokes, and I was like, dude, I got to get you in the movie somehow. He's like, yeah, bro, you got to put me in that movie. And so notorious, white boy Rick, who was locked up for 32 years, came out and did my movie. And I said, Rick, are you cool being in a prison scene? I'm like, if you're not cool being, I don't want to put the orange jumpsuit back on you, but like, this is just a comedy. And I just want to show that the system's upside down and what they did to you was wrong. So let me just give a moment to you. He's like, yeah, bro, whatever you want. So I had white boy Rick in a prison suit back in prison for my movie. And we're friends now, man. We're friends for a few years now.
Yeah, for
So
sure. No,
yeah,
that's awesome. I love that little like call out because it made me like go and like I was like I recognize that name, so I had to go back and like remember the movie I saw and like the story of the things that happened to him that were
crazy.
not great. Yeah.
I was 15 years old working for the feds as an informant, and they just used him and ended up, when he got caught with the drugs, they threw him in prison, gave him a life sentence. And luckily he got out after the 32 years, but he was the youngest kid in America ever sentenced to life on a nonviolent drug offense.
Yeah, exactly. You mentioned that Michael Rapaport was in your earlier movie. I looked it up. Adam is a very different movie from this. I was like, Adam, I don't remember that being a comedy. Like, is
He was.
that?
So Adam was, is with Jeff Daniels and Aaron Paul. And Adam, it was, I wrote it as a dark comedy, and when it finally came out, to be honest, it came out a little more dark than comedy.
You can say that. Yeah.
It's a
But
tragedy. It's a tragedy that, triumph over tragedy. But Dan Gilbert, who's from Detroit, from my same area, He owns Rocket Mortgage. He's a big business guy. He had this actual kid working at his company. And this kid, Adam, had written a journal about his life after he had this tragic accident. And they got a hold of me as a writer, just being from the same area. They kind of contacted me. This is like 8 years ago. And I read his journal and I was like, dude, this is Little Miss Sunshine in a wheelchair. This is the funniest, saddest thing I've ever read. And so they hired me to write the movie. I wrote it. We made the movie, and then that's how I sort of how I came to the whole Detroit connection and these guys that have now produced two of my movies.
Yeah, no, that's
So
awesome.
yeah,
That's
that's how
fantastic.
Adam came about.
Yeah.
But yes, it
No,
was drama. But I always say comedians can do drama.
yep.
Comedians can write dramatic. Dramatic people can't write comedy, generally.
Yeah. No,
You,
that's
if you're
comedy is a specific skill, and if you're up there playing a character telling stories, you can tell serious stories too, and just not have the funny twists on it. All right. So
Totally. Yeah, comedy is kind of the gift. And if you, I've seen so many like actors that are funny, comedians that can actually play drama, but I have not really seen a lot of dramatic actors that could be funny. It's a very strange thing.
And one curious thing I had, you got such a funny cast, such like a seasoned, comedy cast. How much of this was written? How much of it was this was just improv? I imagine it was somewhere in between, but like, did the actors were they off, riffing on camera, or did they try to like stay to the script because they wanted to be true to their characters?
So what I would do, so obviously was I wrote the script. The script was locked. You know what I mean? Like I always make sure the script is locked just so you're not wasting time and money. And so the script was locked. So what we would do is we would shoot, maybe two or three or four takes scripted that were, that by the script. And then I would just say, go have fun. So some of this stuff was super fun. Like once I met Luke Null and Haha, and I realized, and even Dustin, and I realized how funny they were as people and improvers, I had to just let them fly. So we would always shoot the script, and then I would give them one or two takes afterwards to say, just go improv, go have fun, and do your thing. And we have a lot in the movie, especially with Luke Null, who plays Donnie Hefner, this internet sensation, just pompous kid. I let him improv all the time whenever I could because he's just I'm telling you, this kid's the next Will Ferrell to me. Like he's so funny. So I had to let him improv.
No, perfect. And that sounds like the right balance, right? A couple takes with the script and then just let them kind of see what happens and maybe you use that, maybe use a script. At least you have like, the script lines done and then you can play around with the other stuff. So that sounds
Exactly.
right.
As long as they don't change the story, we're good.
Exactly. So I know we have limited time. I'm gonna switch to a lightning round. They're just lightweight questions about the film. I want to hear your personal experiences map the things in the movie. They probably will map fairly closely, but feel free to skip any of them. I will not be offended, but I try to keep them very answerable.
Yeah, go ahead.
First question. When was the last time a promoter screwed you over? You don't have to say what, just when.
It was probably 10 years ago, and the promoter owner uh, actually started a fight in the club, and the club turned into a melee brawl. And let's just say it all turned out bad, and I didn't get my money.
Wow.
That was
Well, at least you got your life, but yeah, you still
I
want the
got
money
my life
too.
barely. That's
Wow.
another story for another podcast. But I didn't
Exactly.
get the money on that, and they basically let me go from the club and never work there again.
Wow.
Things
Uh,
happen.
yeah, this film starts with a couple like last minute spur of the moment tours. When was the last time you did like a ridiculous, spontaneous, like, hey, we're leaving tomorrow on a 10 city tour. Let's go.
I mean, to be honest, I'm on one now. I'm on a 25 city tour. It's called the Rock Comedy Tour. So I'm actually on a tour right now, 4 cities into 25 cities. But it wasn't like a spontaneous, hey, let's get in the car and drive. This was kind of mapped out and organized. I'd say the last time I did like a spontaneous quick move was Sebastian Maniscalco, who's a big comedian. He called me on a Tuesday and he's like, and his opener had fallen out and he was doing arenas. And he's like, hey, man, we got Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago. We got a 5 city run. You in? And I'm like, I'm in. And next thing I know, 3 days later, I'm going to play arenas around the country with Sebastian. So that was probably the most exciting, spontaneous comedy tour.
That's amazing.
And
That's awesome. That is
obviously,
such an opportunity. That's
yeah, and
so
obviously
cool.
I toured with Bob Saget for 10 years. I was with Bob for 10 years. So that was just always amazing, but it wasn't spontaneous. We were planned out.
Yeah, for sure. This movie focuses a lot on followers. How many followers do you have? Do you have a point?
Oh, bro, not enough. Not enough. I got 17,000 followers, but I have this funny video where Bert Kreischer, Bobby Lee, Saget, Pauly Shore, Theo Vaughn. I have this funny video, a compilation video of all these guys talking about me on their podcast, but I'm never on their podcast. And so everyone's got these crazy stories because we had a fun, wild run in comedy. But I'm like a unfamous famous comedian, which is fine.
Yeah, you're funny. You're the people that people talk about. So,
Yeah, yeah, I'm good. I'm good with that right now.
and the last question. This movie's called Stealing Jokes. When was the last time you had a joke stolen? Maybe you've never had a joke stolen, but I imagine in comedy there's, some, borrowing, maybe stealing. I bet it just happens.
The funniest is, and I can tell it because we told it on this podcast, but the funniest is that Brian Callen was doing one of my jokes for a year. And he kind of like, he wasn't being malicious. He actually called me like maybe a year into doing it. And he's like, yo, do you have this joke about blah, blah, blah? I go, yeah, bro. I've been doing that joke for 5 years. He's like, well, I've been doing it for 1 year. So he actually called himself out and was like, dude, I'm so sorry. I'm done doing it. He didn't even do it on purpose. I don't think he did, but he kind of just slid into this bit that I'd been doing and kind of maybe didn't think about where he got it from. So I don't want to call Callan out like that, but we had a good laugh about it because we're friends. He's in my movie, My Man is a Loser. So, we're good friends, but he's like, dude, I've been doing your joke for a year and I'm sorry. And
Yeah.
what can you do? You can only
No, I know. That's actually kind of the nicest story, right? Like he just picked it up, thought it was funny, kind of didn't remember where it came from, and then when he realized it, he like called you up, apologized, and like changed his set. That's actually kind of like the perfect scenario. So
Yeah, I did see one person do my joke at the Comedy Store probably 12 years ago, and just after the set, I was like, "Listen, you know that's my joke, right?" And they were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and they never did it again. But that was the only time I actually caught somebody doing verbatim, word for word, one of my bits.
well, it comes both ways, but you can see some jokes being stolen and potentially some money being stolen in Stealing Jokes coming to digital on demand November 1st, 2024. This is Mike Young, the writer and director. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you.
That was Mike Young, the writer and director of Stealing Jokes, which is releasing on November 1st, 2024. It is a kind of hybrid comedy heist thriller that has some really funny actors, a lot of jokes in a movie called Stealing Jokes, and a fun plot that has plenty of twists along the way. If you like this interview, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.